Rain had been falling for 3 hours straight, turning the normally bustling streets of Midtown into streaks of grey mirrors glinting under car headlights. The chill from the wet pavement rose into the thin drizzle, clinging to the cafe windows, reflecting the dark umbrellas moving quietly outside. Nathan Ellis pulled the frayed brim of his baseball cap lower, walking slowly toward the cafe named Ellis Corner, the place he had poured his trust, sweat and hopes into building 5 years ago. But today, he wasn't Nathan Ellis, the beloved owner customers used to greet with warm smiles. Today, he was just a middle-aged man wearing a dark, worn-out jacket, scuffed shoes, stubble on his chin, his face blending into a crowd no one bothered to notice. Through the foggy window, the warm yellow lights inside still glowed, the rows of wooden chairs still holding the faint scent of freshly ground coffee, bringing back mornings when Nathan would carefully tweak every recipe, every pastry, every angle of the lights, trying to make the cafe a place that felt warm for anyone who stepped inside. But Nathan knew something had changed. 3 weeks ago, his accountant messaged him. Food costs had spiked unusually, even though customer numbers hadn't gone up. The online reviews, once filled with praise, now scattered with complaints. The staff is cold. They turned us away, saying they were full. The food isn't as good anymore. He asked Phil, the assistant manager he had trusted for years, "Is everything okay?" Phil smiled, patted his shoulder, and said, "Everything's fine, boss. You just rest." But Nathan couldn't rest. Those complaints circled in his mind every night as he looked at old photos, his wife and young daughter sitting in the cafe, beaming as they tasted the first pancake he had made with his own hands. Ellis Corner was born to be a place where everyone felt valued, where workers, drivers, tired office staff could find a decent meal at a price they could afford. So why were there people leaving in silence, leaving behind sad reviews, questions that went unanswered? One evening, Nathan stood in front of the mirror, his eyes tired but resolute. "If they're hiding something from me, I need to see it with my own eyes, even if the truth breaks me." This morning, before leaving home, he paused to kiss his sleeping daughter's forehead. His gaze lingered on the photo of his wife and daughter on the table, remembering when his wife once told him, "You built this place not just to make a living, but to do something good for people." Today, Nathan stepped into Ellis Corner as a stranger, carrying a heart full of doubt and determination, ready to face the truth, even if it shattered everything he believed in. The bell above the heavy wooden door jingled as he pushed it open. The warm scent of coffee filled his nose, but Nathan's eyes no longer held warmth. He quietly looked around, waiting to see what Ellis Corner truly was in the eyes of people who didn't know who he was. His breath turned into a thin mist at the doorway, and in that moment, everything began. Nathan's steps were quiet, but his heart pounded as his eyes swept over the cafe. Ellis Corner still smelled of baked goods mixed with roasted coffee. The yellow lights glowed against the lightly polished wooden tables. But this time, in the eyes of a stranger, he saw details he had never seen before. A young woman with purple highlighted hair stood at the front counter, head bent over her phone, fingers scrolling quickly, soft music leaking from her earbuds. Nathan stepped closer, clearing his throat softly, but she didn't look up. He spoke, his voice deeper than usual, with a slight southern accent he had practiced for 3 days. "Hi there, I'd like a table for one." The girl looked up, her eyes sweeping over him, his faded jacket, the old cap hiding most of his face, his worn jeans, mud-stained shoes. Her eyes flickered with annoyance, the corner of her mouth curving into a cold smile. "We're pretty full, mister. Lately people prefer going to the cafe next door." Her voice was flat, impatient, and the word "mister" cut into Nathan's pride like a small blade. He smiled, keeping his voice calm. "I heard the food here is really good. I wanted to try it for myself." The girl, Jenna, sighed, glanced at the 3 empty tables by the window, then turned, picked up an old plastic menu, and led him to a small table near the kitchen, where the sizzling of pans and the loud grind of the coffee machine filled the air. Nathan sat down, his eyes quietly observing. The 3 tables by the window remained empty, but not long after, a neatly dressed middle-aged couple walked in, and Jenna greeted them warmly, guiding them to one of those window tables with a bright smile. Nathan's heart tightened. Was it really just the clothes, the appearance of a person, that determined who got a good seat and who was pushed into the corner? He opened the menu, the very same dishes he had carefully tested and adjusted for each season, for every type of customer. He remembered those late nights, measuring the butter in his croissants, selecting coffee beans to give customers the perfect morning. A moment later, a server came over. It was Julia, with those blue eyes that once made Nathan proud when she confidently said, "I'll bring the best service to your cafe." But today, those eyes swept over him with indifference, no smile appearing on her face. "What do you want to order?" Her voice was flat, her eyes briefly scanning his old clothes, pausing at his worn-out shoes before moving to her notepad. Nathan gave a soft smile. "I'll have a grilled chicken sandwich, the soup of the day, and a black coffee, thank you." Julia quickly scribbled it down, didn't look him in the eye, and said curtly, "Just a moment," before walking away. Nathan sat quietly, watching as Julia disappeared into the kitchen. Through the crack in the door, he saw Julia lean in to whisper something to Tom, the head chef Nathan had personally hired with a salary above market rates because he believed Tom would help preserve the flavors of Ellis Corner. Julia's voice came through, not loud, but in that moment of noisy chatter, Nathan heard every word. "Cancel the order. He's not a regular." Tom looked up, glancing quickly toward where Nathan sat, his eyes slowly moving from Nathan's cap to his jacket to his shoes, then nodded, a flicker of agreement passing over his face. "Okay, what reason do you want me to give?" Julia folded her arms, shrugged. "Say the kitchen's backed up, the soup's cold, make up whatever." A sharp pain shot through Nathan's chest. He clenched his hands until his knuckles turned white, but his eyes didn't leave the kitchen door. He saw Tom crumple the order slip, toss it into the trash, then turn back, laughing with a co-worker. Out in the cafe, laughter and conversation continued as the newly arrived couple were served 2 steaming plates of pancakes, the smell delicious and warm. A group of office workers received their lattes with foamed milk, glasses of water with lemon slices, and bright smiles from Jenna. Meanwhile, Nathan sat silently in the dark corner, with no one returning to check on him, no one refilling his water, no one asking if he wanted to order anything else. In that moment, Ellis Corner was no longer the beloved home in his heart. It had become a strange place where he, the founder, was rejected by the very people who once called him boss. Nathan's breath trembled lightly. In his mind, he saw the image of the pancake he had once made for his wife and daughter, dissolving into the sound of sizzling pans, mixing with the scent of coffee growing cold in his hands, leaving a bitter taste that caught in his throat. Nathan sat still, his arm resting lightly on the table, eyes staring into the distance, but his ears picking up every small sound in the cafe. He didn't need to pretend to scroll on his phone, didn't need to pretend to sip a coffee that had never been brought out. He just needed to observe. A young delivery boy in a blue uniform walked into the cafe, sweat dotting his forehead, his eyes glinting with hope. He approached the counter, speaking politely. "Excuse me, ma'am, could I sit down for a quick meal before my next delivery?" Jenna looked up, her eyes flicking down to his rain-splattered uniform and worn shoes before she lowered her head to wipe down the counter. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Sorry, the kitchen's too busy. We're not taking single diners right now." Nathan tilted his head slightly, seeing through the kitchen crack as Tom laughed with Julia, hands quickly stacking large sandwich orders onto trays. Other staff moved around with steaming plates of food, the scent of melting butter and grilled meat filling the air. There was no sign the kitchen was too busy at all. The delivery boy gave a tight, awkward smile, a flicker of sadness in his eyes, bowed his head in thanks, and quietly walked out the door. Drops of water fell from his hair onto the floor, merging with the streaks of rain, leaving footprints across the cold tiles. And Nathan saw it. He looked around the cafe, seeing a family of 3 walk in. The father wore a worker's shirt, worn jeans, his calloused hands holding a small girl sleeping on his shoulder. The mother gently removed the child's knit cap, smoothing her hair, eyes searching around the cafe, hoping to find a warm place to sit. Jenna stepped out, that cold smile appearing again. "Sorry, we're full today." The father turned, his voice soft. "We just need a small table. Our daughter's very tired. We'll eat quickly." Jenna shook her head, folding her arms, saying nothing else. Nathan saw them stand there for a moment, then quietly turned to leave, the little girl shifting in her father's arms, her eyelids fluttering, her tiny hands clenching as the cold wind swept through. As soon as that family left, a well-dressed young couple walked in. Jenna's demeanor changed instantly, a bright smile lighting her face, her voice gentle. "Welcome, you two. We have a table by the window ready for you." Nathan watched, his eyes slowly absorbing every detail. The way Jenna bent to greet them, the neatly folded napkins, the glasses filled with water, the young couple laughing softly as they watched the rain fall outside the window. Meanwhile, in the corner, Nathan sat in silence, his water glass still empty, no one asking if he needed a refill, no one asking if he wanted to order anything else. Another employee named Chris walked past Nathan's table with a tray full of drinks, his eyes flicking over Nathan before quickly turning away, as if Nathan didn't exist. And when Nathan looked deep into Chris's eyes, he didn't see annoyance, nor did he see hatred. What he saw was resignation. The look of someone who knew exactly what he was doing was wrong, but had grown so used to it that he no longer resisted. A strange aroma began to drift through the air, the scent of seared beef, butter melting on golden toasted bread, the smell of expensive ingredients that Nathan knew for a fact were not supposed to be on today's menu. He glanced toward the kitchen, seeing Tom carefully sprinkling melted cheese over a plate, gently layering slices of tender pink beef, adding a few sprigs of parsley. Julia stood beside him, holding a glass of red wine, taking a small sip, smiling softly. They were using the cafe's ingredients during business hours, But for whom? At that moment, another server carried a large tray straight past the counter, heading for the back door. Nathan leaned, catching sight of neatly stacked takeout boxes, steam rising from the hot meals inside. A customer at a nearby table asked, "Excuse me, could I get a to-go box, please?" The employee gave an awkward smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we're out of boxes today." But Nathan saw clearly those high-quality takeout boxes being wheeled out the back, perfectly stacked on a cart. Pieces of the puzzle began fitting together in Nathan's mind. A system that discriminated between customers. A system that prioritized the wealthy while turning away those less fortunate. A system that quietly siphoned off expensive food. A smoothly operating silent system of deceit. And it was all happening inside Ellis Corner, the cafe bearing his name, built with his sweat and labor, run by people who once called him Boss. Nathan understood that what he saw today was only the tip of the iceberg, the surface of what was destroying the place he once believed was a home for workers who deserved respect. Evening fell, the warm lights inside the cafe gradually overpowering the natural light, reflecting off the glass cups on the tables, creating glints of dancing reflections. Nathan sat quietly at the corner table near the kitchen, each second ticking by like a blade scraping inside him, leaving a dull, persistent ache. He decided to stand up. His steps were unhurried, but his eyes swept across the cafe. Jenna was still laughing with a group of young customers. Julia was leaning in and smiling at a customer in an expensive suit, while Tom in the kitchen was drizzling sauce over a salad with meticulous professional care. Nathan walked toward the back door, where the takeout boxes had been taken earlier, determined to check where they were going. He passed through the cleaning area, where a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair was diligently mopping the floor. It was Luis, the janitor Nathan had heard about in reports, the man who always arrived early, stayed late, and never missed a shift. Luis looked up, his kind eyes meeting Nathan's, then lowering again as his wrinkled hands gripped the mop, his movements steady and patient. Nathan paused, cleared his throat, keeping the southern accent he had practiced. "Hey there, could you tell me where I sign for deliveries?" Luis looked up, his eyes surprised, but still kind. "Oh, you should find Miss Julia or Manager Phil for that. I'm just the cleaning guy." Nathan smiled slightly, looking into his eyes. "How long have you worked here?" Luis wiped his hands on an old rag, pride flickering in his eyes. "Been almost 8 months now. I really like it here. Folks are friendly, and everyone says it feels like family." Nathan felt a sharp pang in his chest when he heard the word family. He looked deeply into Luis's experienced eyes. "Do you see the staff here often taking food from the cafe?" Luis hesitated, his eyes shifting. Well, I guess it's not a big deal." Nathan tilted his head, remaining silent, just watching. Luis sighed, setting the mop aside. "Truth is, they share the good stuff, you know, the beef, the salmon. Each day someone takes a turn. They say it's a staff privilege to understand the food quality." Nathan lowered his gaze, hiding the pain in his eyes, nodding slowly. "And do you think that's okay?" Luis chuckled lightly, deep lines forming around his eyes. "I just do my job, keeping the place clean and smelling nice. They tell me I can have free coffee, and that's enough for me. I don't want to bother anyone." His eyes lowered, his wrinkled hands twisting the damp rag, hesitation flickering in his gaze. "But the other day, I saw Phil take a big box of meat home, said it was for a family gathering, and Julia had a bottle of wine. I figured the boss was okay with it, so I didn't ask." Nathan felt his chest tighten, his breath shivering slightly, but he kept his gentle smile. "Thank you. You're a good man." Luis smiled, his eyes shining with a quiet kindness. "This place, it really feels like family to me." Nathan turned to walk away, but Luis's words, "feels like family," echoed in his mind like a dull knife scraping at his pride. Family. A family where some quietly sacrifice while others shamelessly steal and discriminate against customers to feed their own greed. He stepped out the back door into the light drizzle, the cold air hitting his face, mixing with the heavy sorrow twisting in his chest. Raindrops fell on his face, blending with the cold sweat on his skin, like tears that could not fall aloud. Nathan looked up at the grey sky, the dim streetlights casting his shadow on the wet pavement, reflecting a man lost, standing in the place he once believed was his home. That night, Nathan sat quietly in his small apartment, the warm yellow kitchen light casting shadows across his solemn face, highlighting the deep lines around his eyes, the grey strands in his hair. On the table, his laptop displayed Ellis Corner's expense sheets, rows of numbers blinking under the lamp. He took a deep breath, his hand gripping the mouse, eyes tense as they scanned each number, each line of ingredient costs. Coffee, bread, milk, familiar items, but mixed in were unusual entries: Norwegian salmon, Wagyu beef, truffles, Italian red wine. The total values were far higher than the actual customer volume. How long have they been stealing? How many customers have been turned away so these chosen dishes could be served to others? Nathan switched tabs, comparing supply orders with sales volume. The cold spreadsheet displayed stark numbers. 15 cows of beef purchased, only 3 keys sold. 10 keys of salmon purchased, 1.5 keys sold. 12 bottles of wine purchased, 2 sold. The discrepancies each week added up to hundreds of dollars, each month climbing into thousands, enough to pay bonuses for the entire staff, enough to repair the cafe, enough to provide community meals as Nathan had always dreamed. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, his eyes red, deep, and weary. In that silence, Nathan saw the bright smile of his wife in the photo next to the laptop, saw his daughter's joyful grin as she ate the first pancake he ever made for her. "I built Ellis Corner so people could feel respected, so tired workers could have a decent meal. And now—" Nathan buried his face in his hands, letting out a heavy, weighted sigh. A soft notification chimed from his phone beside him. He picked it up, reading a message from a friend who used to work in security. "New mini cameras just arrived. Let me know if you need them." Nathan stared at the message, a glint of resolve flashing in his eyes. He stood up, pulled on his jacket, grabbed his car keys, and stepped out into the cold night. The next morning, Ellis Corner opened like any other day, the scent of coffee rich in the air, sunlight cutting through the fogged windows, leaving patchy streaks on the tiled floor. Julia stood at the front, smiling sweetly at customers in suits, while Jenna continued to dismiss casually dressed customers. But today, Nathan didn't walk in wearing old, worn clothes. He wore a black jacket, his baseball cap pulled low, carrying a small bag with mini camera equipment, heading straight for the kitchen, the storage room, and the cash register area. Using the busy morning delivery rush, while staff were distracted prepping for the day, he installed each tiny camera in hidden corners, above the fridge, under the spice shelf, inside the liquor cabinet, at the back entrance, near the front counter, and inside the cold storage. Each tiny camera, with its black lens, quietly observed, ready to capture every moment. Nathan left the cafe at 9 a.m., got into his car, turned on the monitoring screen, and took a deep breath. He knew that from this moment on, the truth could no longer be hidden. By noon, Nathan sat in his car, eyes locked on the laptop screen connected to the cameras, his breathing uneven as the footage played. Tom sprinkling truffles onto a pasta dish not on the menu, Julia pouring red wine into a glass, laughing as she clinked glasses with another staff member, the moment Phil walked out of the cold storage with a large box of beef, slipping it into his black bag with a sly grin. A moment later, Julia moved to the front counter, picked up the reservation list, crossed off a customer wearing an old jacket, whispering to Jenna, "Skip this one. Save the table for the good customers." Jenna nodded, glancing briefly at the official surveillance camera, putting on a fake smile before looking back down at her phone. Every image, every word, every complicit glance, every stifled giggle behind the kitchen doors, everything was captured by the hidden cameras. Nathan leaned back in his car seat, his hand gripping the steering wheel, his chest rising and falling with anger and pain. He closed his eyes, but the images from earlier remained clear in his mind. He knew that the fight to reclaim Ellis Corner had begun, and he would not back down. The next day, the early morning light streamed through the curtains, casting lines of pale gold across Nathan's gaunt face as he sat at his desk, eyes locked on the laptop, displaying the camera feeds. Tiny frames captured every corner of Ellis Corner, from the sweltering kitchen, the coffee bar scented with roasted beans hanging in the air, to the cold storage stacked with boxes of meat and fish. Nathan took a sip of cold coffee, his eyes never leaving the screen. He saw Tom carefully slicing pieces of beef, sprinkling sea salt, then placing them into a heavy cast-iron pan, the sizzle ringing out like a dark, unsettling melody. Beside Tom, Julia was laughing, holding a glass of red wine, taking a delicate sip before setting it down and wiping her mouth with exaggerated grace. On the counter, neatly arranged slices of black truffle sat ready, expensive ingredients that were never meant to be on the cafe's menu, still being used without hesitation. The overhead camera at the coffee bar caught Phil, the shift manager, quietly slipping a takeout box into a paper grocery bag, his eyes darting around before he turned to smile at another employee. By noon, Nathan left his apartment, pulling on a long black coat, fastening each button carefully before stepping into the street. He knew it was time to return to Ellis Corner himself, to face the people who were destroying his dream. The cafe was bustling as usual, the smell of hot coffee blending with the sweetness of freshly baked pastries. Jenna was at the front counter, smiling as she led a pair of office workers to a window seat. Julia was laughing brightly with a group of young customers, her laughter louder as she accepted tips. But Nathan's eyes only stopped when he saw Luis, the janitor, bent over in the corner, patiently mopping the floor, his wrinkled hands gripping the mop, his kind face focused on every small stain. Nathan walked up to the bar, placing a hand on the counter, his eyes locking onto Phil. "Good afternoon, Phil." His voice was deep, quiet, but enough to make Phil flinch, the coffee cup in his hand nearly slipping. Phil forced a smile. "Oh, boss, what a surprise seeing you here today." Nathan didn't respond. His eyes no longer carried the warmth they once did, only the cold of a man who had seen the truth. He stepped into the kitchen where Tom was searing beef in wine sauce. The heat from the pan filled the air, the aroma drifting through the room, but to Nathan it no longer smelled inviting. "Tom." His voice was even. Tom turned, a stiff smile on his face. "Oh, hey, boss. I was trying out a new dish to maybe add to the menu." Nathan looked at the plate in Tom's hand, slices of tender pink beef, edges seared perfectly, red wine sauce glistening as it dripped down the plate. "Wagyu beef, Italian red wine, truffles. What ingredients are you using for this trial?" Nathan's voice was calm, but his eyes pierced straight through Tom. Tom fell silent, his eyes wavering, his throat swallowing hard, offering no answer. At that moment, Julia walked into the kitchen, carrying a tray of desserts, forcing a strained smile when she saw Nathan. "Boss, I was just preparing dessert for a VIP guest." "Which VIP?" Nathan's voice dropped, his eyes never leaving Julia's face. Just a regular, I mean," Julia stammered, her eyes flicking to Tom, avoiding Nathan's gaze. The kitchen air thickened, the hum of the exhaust fan loud, sounding like a judgment hanging in the room. Nathan stepped out of the kitchen, his eyes sweeping the cafe, seeing well-dressed customers being served with care, cups of coffee full, pastries lined neatly on plates. In the corner, a man wearing a blue work shirt speckled with paint held his old cap in his hands, sitting alone, in front of him only an empty glass of water, with no one asking him if he needed anything else. Nathan took a deep breath, his hand clenching around the phone in his pocket, deciding. He left the cafe, stepping into his car parked under the shade, his hands trembling slightly as he opened his laptop, connecting it to the hidden camera system inside Ellis Corner. On the screen, each frame came into clear focus. The kitchen, the front counter, the cold storage, the bar, every corner exposing the raw truth he had never wanted to see. Tom was plating slices of Wagyu beef, drizzling them with red wine sauce, scattering thin slices of black truffle on top. Julia stood beside him, taking a sip of wine, laughing brightly, whispering something that made Tom throw his head back in laughter. At the front counter, Jenna held the reservation book, crossing out the name of a customer wearing an old jacket, saying to a new employee, "Don't take this one. Save the table for VIPs." The new employee hesitated. But they were here first. Jenna's lips curled, her eyes sharp. Here, the ones dressed nicely get priority. Got it? In the cold storage, Phil was quietly opening a foam box of meat and fish, pulling out 2 trays of beef, slipping them into a black plastic bag, eyes darting before shoving it into his personal bag. He turned to another staff member, patting them on the back. "Family's eating good tonight." Nathan watched, his breathing heavy, his hands gripping the sides of his seat until his knuckles turned white. In that moment, the image of his wife and daughter flashed in his mind, his wife's gentle smile when she supported him in opening the cafe, the sparkle in his daughter's eyes when she happily ate pancakes there in the mornings. Ellis Corner wasn't created to feed greed or to discriminate against people. It was created so everyone could feel respected. Nathan closed the laptop, pulled out his phone, and dialed. "Luis, do you have a minute to talk?" Luis's gentle voice came through the phone, surprised. "Yes, boss. What do you need?" "Just stay put. I'm coming in." That afternoon, Nathan walked into Ellis Corner, his eyes cold, holding his laptop and a small USB drive. The cafe was still filled with the clink of cups, the chatter of customers, the warm scent of coffee and pastries in the air. Nathan stopped in the middle of the cafe, his face no longer holding the gentle smile it once did. Julia froze mid-laugh with a customer. Phil emerged from the storage room, his eyes flickering with worry. Tom peeked from the kitchen, tongs still in hand. Nathan plugged the USB into the cafe's wall-mounted TV, connecting it to the speaker system. He took a deep breath, looking around, his voice deep but clear. "Excuse me, could I have everyone's attention for a moment? I'm Nathan Ellis, the founder of Ellis Corner." The cafe fell silent. Julia clutched her tray. Jenna swallowed hard. Phil took a step back, eyes darting nervously. Some customers turned to each other, whispering, "That's the owner." Nathan pressed play. The screen instantly showed Tom drizzling wine sauce over Wagyu beef, Julia laughing with a glass of wine, Phil stealing meat from the storage. Tom's chuckle, Julia's words, "VIPs are the ones worth serving," Jenna crossing off the name of a poor customer. Every word echoed clearly. The air in the cafe thickened. Customers were stunned, those who had been turned away now glaring at Julia, Jenna, and Phil with outrage. A man in a work uniform clenched his fists, his voice shaking. "Last week, I brought my daughter here, and you turned us away, just because we aren't rich." A woman nearby held her small son's hand tightly. "I thought Ellis Corner was a place of kindness, but this—" Julia tried to step forward, her voice trembling. "No, it's not what you think. We just—" Nathan raised a hand, cutting her off. "Enough, Julia." His eyes looked directly into each of theirs, no longer holding simple anger, but the deep hurt of a father, of a man who once believed in the family he tried to build at Ellis Corner. He turned to Luis, who stood by the counter, his old eyes wide, tears welling up. Luis whispered, I didn't know any of this. I thought this place was a family." Nathan placed a hand on Luis's shoulder, nodding softly. "I know you didn't. And because of you, I know there's still hope for Ellis Corner." He turned back to face everyone. "Today, I'm here to make it clear. Ellis Corner will not tolerate greed and discrimination. I will not let these people continue to stain this place." He turned to Julia, Phil, and Tom, his eyes firm. "You are all fired, effective immediately." The cafe fell completely silent. Only the sound of heavy breathing, the angry, ashamed, shocked faces of those who had just been exposed. But Nathan knew this was only the beginning of Ellis Corner's rebirth. The air inside Ellis Corner was thick after the announcement. The soft whispers gradually died, leaving behind a silence so heavy it was almost suffocating. Julia stood frozen, the tray trembling in her hands, pastries falling to the floor, breaking apart, crumbs scattering across the cold tile. Phil's face turned bright red, his eyes darting wildly, looking to Tom for some kind of ally in his desperation. Tom clenched the tongs in his hand, his jaw tight, but his eyes dropping, knowing there was no way out. A customer stood up. It was Mr. Miller, a construction worker who had once been turned away. All week I work 16 hours a day, just hoping to bring my daughter here for pancakes on the weekend. And you thought I wasn't worthy, just because of the paint on my clothes. His voice trembled, his daughter standing beside him, her innocent eyes frightened as she looked around the room. Across the cafe, Mrs. Collins, the elderly woman who always came to read her book, stood with tears welling in her eyes. I always believed this place was a warm stop along the way. I never realized the comfort I felt came at the cost of injustice others had to bear. Julia stepped forward, her voice hissing through clenched teeth, her eyes darting wildly between fear and desperation. I did it because the wages here were too low, because we weren't valued, because we deserved a little more. Nathan looked straight at Julia, his voice low but sharp as a blade. You stole from customers. You lied to hard-working people to gain a little for yourself, and that's your idea of respect. Julia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Beside her, Tom dropped the meat tongs, the metallic clang on the counter sounding cold and final. Phil shot a hateful glance at Nathan before lowering his eyes, trembling. Nathan looked around the cafe, his eyes no longer angry, but filled with the pain of a father watching his dream get tainted, yet standing firm to protect it. He grabbed a paper bag, handing it to Julia, Phil, and Tom. Go. Take whatever you've taken, return what you still have, or keep it. I don't care. I just don't want to see you here for another second. Julia burst into tears. Phil bit his lip until it bled. Tom lowered his head, eyes red. They quietly gathered their things, walking past the stares of contempt, anger, pity, and disappointment from those who had once trusted them. As they walked out, a cold wind swept into the cafe, carrying away the scent of pastries and coffee, and with it the gloom that had hung over this place for months. The door closed. Ellis Corner exhaled. Nathan turned to Luis, who was standing by the counter, still clutching his mop, his old eyes red and shaking. "Boss, I didn't know. I thought this place was family." Nathan placed a hand on Luis's shoulder, squeezing gently, his eyes softening as he nodded. "You are the best part of this family, Luis." Luis's eyes filled with tears, the light of faith in them undimmed, his voice raspy with emotion. I'll do whatever it takes to help this place become what it was meant to be." Nathan turned to the customers, his voice clear. "I'm sorry I let these people ruin this place. I didn't see the truth soon enough. Ellis Corner was not created to discriminate or deceive. This will be a place where anyone, workers, drivers, students, retirees, will be respected." Mr. Miller stepped forward, placing a hand on Nathan's shoulder, his eyes glistening. "I believe in you, Nathan. We need a place like this." Other customers nodded. Some shook Nathan's hand, some smiled, some wiped away tears. In that moment, Nathan understood that Ellis Corner had moved past its darkest hour, ready to be reborn, stronger and kinder. The sound of the cafe door closing behind Julia, Phil, and Tom left a heavy silence. Nathan stood still, taking a deep breath, feeling the air clear as if the cafe had been purified after a storm. He looked around, meeting the eyes of the customers still seated. Mr. Miller, the worker with calloused hands. Mrs. Collins, the elderly woman clutching her book. The young student with a worn backpack. The young mother holding her child. All those eyes were waiting for him. No longer eyes of suspicion, but eyes of hope. Nathan walked to the counter where Louis was still standing, gripping the mop handle, his gaze anxious. Nathan placed a hand on his shoulder, looking into the kind eyes of the janitor, his voice low but warm. "Louis, starting today, I want you to become the assistant manager of Ellis Corner." Louis's eyes widened, his voice trembling. "Boss, I'm just the cleaner. I don't know how to manage." Nathan smiled, the first smile in days. "I don't need someone who knows how to steal or discriminate. I need someone who knows how to respect people and protect kindness in this place. You have that." Louis covered his mouth, tears rolling down his aged cheeks. I promise I will do my best." Nathan turned back to the customers. "I know that an apology alone can't erase the hurt and disappointment you've experienced, but I promise, from today on, Ellis Corner will be a place where everyone is welcome, no matter who you are, how you dress, or what job you do." He paused, looking at everyone, his eyes steady. "I will establish a community meal fund here at Ellis Corner. Each day we will set aside meals for workers, students, drivers, and anyone in need of a warm meal. No questions, no judgment." A gentle breeze rustled the small bell hanging over the door. The cafe remained quiet, and then, unexpectedly, a round of applause began. Mrs. Collins, eyes wet, placed a hand over her heart, nodding at Nathan. Mr. Miller stood tall, smiling, a rare smile, as he clapped. Other customers, one by one, joined in, softly at first, then with a rising warmth that filled Ellis Corner. Louis stood next to Nathan, his eyes red but smiling, his raspy voice soft. "I've never seen a place do this, boss." Nathan patted Louis on the shoulder, whispering, "We will, Louis, because this place belongs to everyone." That afternoon, Nathan and Louis got to work cleaning and reorganizing Ellis Corner. Louis removed his apron, stained from mopping, and put on an old but clean white shirt. Together, he and Nathan checked the cold storage, taking inventory, throwing out anything without a clear source, relabeling every item. They tore down the blacklists that Julia and Jenna had kept, ripping them up in front of the remaining staff. Nathan hung a new sign at the entrance. "Welcome, everyone. No discrimination, no judgment. Everyone deserves respect." Below it, a smaller line read, "If you need a meal but can't pay, let us know. We'll take care of the rest." As the sign went up, Mr. Miller approached, removing his old hard hat, nodding at Nathan. "Thank you, Nathan. I'll keep coming back, not just for the coffee, but because I believe in this place." A young student stepped forward, handing Nathan a crumpled $5 bill. "I'd like to contribute to the meal fund." Nathan squeezed his hand, eyes glistening. "Thank you. You're making this place what it's meant to be." That evening, as Ellis Corner closed early to clean and reset, the golden sunset streamed through the windows, lighting up Louis and Nathan as they wiped down tables, washed cups swept the floor. They exchanged smiles without saying a word. Outside, passers-by paused to read the new sign, smiling before moving on, leaving behind a quiet ripple of hope in the air. Ellis Corner had begun its rebirth through kindness, courage, and the refusal to compromise with wrongdoing. On the first morning that Ellis Corner reopened after the cleansing, Nathan stood in front of the mirror, straightening his collar, taking a deep breath. In the reflection, he saw a tired man, but with eyes bright again, no longer shadowed by betrayal. When he arrived at the cafe, Luis was already there, wearing a clean apron, carefully wiping each table with the dedication of a man who loved this place like his own home. Seeing Nathan, Luis smiled, his warm eyes shining. "We're going to do great today, boss." Nathan nodded, patting Luis on the shoulder, feeling the old man's hands trembling with nerves, but also with resolve. He walked to the counter, speaking to Nathan. "I once accepted privileges I didn't deserve. Today, I'd like to give back and contribute to the meal fund." He placed a small check into Nathan's hand, smiling with a rare peace. Nathan squeezed his hand, nodding gratefully. Ellis Corner slowly became the warm refuge it was meant to be, a place where the old and young, the rich and poor, were all welcome. No more judgmental eyes, no more blacklists, no more discrimination. Only laughter, stories, and the aroma of warm coffee and freshly baked bread each morning. At night, as the cafe closed, Nathan and Luis stood side by side, looking through the glass at the clean wooden tables reflecting the soft yellow light, their lined faces tired, but their eyes shining with hope. Luis whispered, "I never thought I'd live to see a place like this." Nathan smiled, placing a hand on Luis's shoulder. "You didn't just see it, Luis. You helped make it." That morning, the sky was grey, light drizzle misting the streets, cold air seeping through the door, mixing with the scent of pastries rising in the oven. Luis was wiping down the counter when Nathan walked in, nodding, rolling up his sleeves to brew coffee for the first customers. The doorbell jingled. A young woman stepped in, rain-soaked jacket clinging to her, hair tangled, holding the hand of a small boy about 5, the boy wrapped in an old red scarf, eyes wide with curiosity and caution. Luis stepped forward, smiling softly. "Good morning, ma'am. Please come in. What would the young man like today?" The mother lowered her head, her voice small, hesitant. We just need to sit somewhere warm. We don't need to order." Luis looked at Nathan, their eyes exchanging silent understanding. Nathan crouched down to the boy's eye level, smiling. "Do you like pancakes, buddy? I can make you a small plate with honey and banana if you give me a smile." The boy looked at his mother, who nodded gently, and then turned to Nathan, offering a shy, gap-toothed smile. Nathan returned to the kitchen, personally preparing a warm plate of pancakes, slicing bananas, drizzling honey, adding a pinch of cinnamon. He placed it before the boy, steam rising, the sweet aroma filling the air. The boy's eyes lit up, his tiny hands reaching for the plate, pausing to look at his mother, seeking permission. She squeezed his hand, eyes glistening. Below it was a caption. "Today, I didn't just have a good breakfast. I was reminded that kindness still exists." The post spread, stories about Ellis Corner shared everywhere, about a small cafe willing to open its arms to tired workers, struggling students, and single mothers trying to get by. Soon, new customers came, some leaving a few dollars, others writing checks for the community meal fund. But the most precious gift wasn't the money. It was trust. It was the hope being restored in every person who stepped through Ellis Corner's door. One morning, Nathan stepped outside the cafe, looking in at the customers inside. A worker eating a quick breakfast before his shift. A student reading a book over coffee. A young mother coaxing her child to eat pancakes. An elderly woman smiling at Luis. They were different in age, jobs and backgrounds, but all shared the same look, no longer tired, but warm and hopeful. Nathan smiled softly, closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of coffee and fresh pastries, and thought, Ellis Corner has returned to what it was meant to be, not just a cafe, but a home. And with every cup of coffee poured, every loaf of bread baked, a piece of faith in kindness was passed on. Because one good meal may not change the whole world, but it can change someone's darkest day. And sometimes that is the most important thing.